Starting us off with number 10 is the skunk ape. Late at night, a driver stopped to pee in an undeveloped area. His sister in the car claimed someone's coming as he heard branches snapping in the woods next to them. He looked up to see a dark-colored 7 to 8 foot animal running towards him. As he got into the car and sped away, they saw the giant beast watching them leave. That was the first ever account of someone seeing the skunk ape back in 1989. Known to be Florida's own version of the Sasquatch, and countless people have sent in descriptions and reports of seeing the beast, and they all match up. The thing is bipedal but walks with a bit of a hunch, and as you might have guessed, it's very much a carnivore. The worst bit about this one is that a photo was sent in to the Sarasota sheriff in 2000 of the beast, and it looks like something out of your worst nightmares. Apparently the anonymous person was leaving treats out for it to make it come back. Like, mate, it's a skunk ape, not a cute little fox or something to leave treats out for. Cut that out. Stop leaving treats. Jeez. Coming in at number 9 is the Maryland goat man. The title of this article was "Goats Shouldn't Walk on Two Legs," and I 100% agree with that. They shouldn't. Yet somehow one is. Legend has it the Maryland goat man is a half man, half goat creature who roams the forests of Beltsville with an axe. And there's two versions of his origin story. The first is that a man who kept goats went completely mad after a bunch of teenagers killed his flock. The incident made him bloodthirsty for revenge. But why would a bunch of teenagers kill goats? Like, what would they even get out of that? Is that what the teens are doing these days? Shocking. Shocking. Now the second story is that a scientist was conducting experiments on a goat with human DNA and things went horribly wrong, thus turning the goat into a half man, half goat beast. The legend gained a lot of publicity in the 50s, 60s and 70s when a huge German shepherd was found cleanly decapitated in the forest. People have reported seeing him for decades now, and I honestly believe them. But also, if it was created way back when, shouldn't it be dead by now? Like, what's the lifespan of a goat, you guys? Surely it's time has come, surely. At number 8 we have the Demon of Dartmoor. Now legend has it, and it's not even legend, eyewitness reports say that the demon is a massive 4-legged hairy beast with glowing eyes. It's said to have a thick shaggy coat, round ears, and the limbs of King Kong. Exaggeration there, a little bit, but they are strong enough to tear straight through human flesh, so how much was I really exaggerating? Really? Over the years, people have thought it was a large wild cat or dog, some think it's a bear or Wolverine. I didn't even know Wolverine was real. A falconer who stood 200 meters away from the demon said size-wise it's like a miniature pony and it moved like a feline but reminded him of a bear. Can that description give off any more mixed signals? Seriously. The founder of the National Research Network, Big Cats, even said this thing is definitely not a wild cat or a dog. He went on to say he saw a collie-sized cat in the area 10 years prior, but the Demon of Dartmoor is a lot bigger than that, so that's just great. The picture I saw of it makes it look like a mix of a gorilla, a boar, and my ex. Filling our number 7 slot is the Faceless. I feel like I just named a new species of people, like the Faceless. But anyway, this story comes from a member of the Philippine Marine Corps, and he said he went out on patrol after his unit received information about an enemy sighting. After 3 days of camping around bushes in the jungle and forests nearby, they found a figure in the distance. They started approaching the figure slowly, but the closer they got, the more the horror really set in. The person wasn't walking, they seemed to be floating, and that wasn't even the worst part. It was dressed like a normal living person, but it had no face. The soldier went on to say it was like the face of the person had been erased. Its skin was so pale it was almost translucent, like all its blood had been drained. It had bullet wounds all throughout its chest, and at one point it looked straight into the soldier's rifle scope, and the soldier claimed he had never been that scared in his life. Keep in mind this man is on the battlefield, so you can well imagine the fear. Now I'm assuming the soldier saw the ghost or apparition of a dead soldier who had probably bled out from their bullet wounds, but the whole erased face thing is a complete mystery to me. Do you guys have any ideas? Let me know below. Now at number 6 is question mark. Honestly, I'm about to tell you the experience of a hunter in a forest who wasn't even sure what he saw, so how am I even meant to label the this one. The man was in the deepest parts of the woods near a lake, and he'd hunted many times before, but this time things just felt off. For some odd reason he felt like he was being watched, but he tried to just brush it off regardless. He was sat in a tree stand when he heard the howl of a huge creature making its way across the thicket. He initially thought it was just a group of wild hogs, but he realized all the howling was coming from one thing. The creature was moving slowly, it was remaining out of sight, and it was moving through the lake. Mind you, the lake was about waist high on the hunter, so you can imagine just how large this creature was. It was advancing slowly and silently through the water and then dashed into the thicket. The hunter didn't actually manage to see the creature, but when he came back a few days later to get his bag, he found deep claw marks on the tree he'd been using, and his bag was gone. And that's all he wrote. Coming in at number 5 is The Witch. Now personally, I think this one is 100% fake. It seemed like special effects to me, but you guys can decide for yourselves. Now this video was uploaded by YouTuber True Chooser back in 2010, and it shows a dirt road with woodland on each side of it. In the middle of the road up ahead is this dark grey creature sitting on the ground. Like, the body looks clearly human, except its fingers are creepily long and thin, and as the cameraman gets closer, the thing turns around and you can see it's a female with long hair and dark facial features. And then the video just conveniently ends. First of all, if that was real and you saw that sliding across the road, why would you get that close to it? Surely the natural thing to do would be just to stay in your car and maybe run it over. I don't know. Apparently the Witch is from the game Left 4 Dead, and I'm pretty sure it is. Good try, True Chooser, but not good enough. At number 4 is the Michigan Dogman. Why are there so many hybrid human-animal creatures lurking around? I mean, I'm not mad at it, but is it a cause for concern? Maybe. The first ever sighting of the Michigan Dogman was in 1887, when 2 lumberjacks claimed to have seen a massive creature that had the body of a man and the head of a dog. Countless sightings of the beast have been reported for years, and the creature is usually blamed for the death of pets and horses. A photo was submitted by a boy who was just sitting in the back of his parents' minivan, and it's blurry, but you can definitely make out it's an animal of some kind, and it looks massive. If anything, I feel like the head looks like a massive tiger's head rather than a dog's. I don't know which dog looks like that honestly, but it does look bipedal for sure. A sighting in 1977 happened where 2 brothers were biking near Manistee National Forest, and one got left behind, and as he turned around, he saw a face covered in black fur watching him from behind a tree. But the face was a good 7 feet off the ground, and as soon as they made eye contact, the creature ran away. The brother followed him and noticed dark red bands of colored fur on both of his ankles, and I love how this thing could probably take him in a 1v1, but it just ran away scared. I sensed the dogness in him. Maybe he just wanted a friend. Filling our number 3 slot is the Donkey Lady. I've read about a lot of legends. Now, I've read a lot of legends in my time here at Top 10, but I've never actually encountered this one, originating in San Antonio, Texas. In the 50s, a woman was really badly burnt in a house fire, and I'm talking 3rd-degree burns everywhere. Her face was disfigured and her toes and fingers burnt off completely, making her feet and hands look like hooves. On top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, both of her children were killed in the fire as well, which was the last straw for the woman, and I'm really not surprised. She slowly descended into madness. Locals in town decided to banish her for her crazy rantings, and she went and lived under an old stone bridge located off Applewhite Road. The bridge is between 2 forests or woodland areas where she usually hides and then attacks passerbys. I mean, should I be saying creature? Would she be a ghost by now? I have no clue. Anyone living in San Antonio, have you witnessed this? Let me know in the comments below. Now at number 2 is the Hodag. Now this one came from Wisconsin folklore and is meant to be a small but fierce animal, quite like myself. Found in forests and caves alike, according to an 1893 newspaper report, it was said to have the head of a frog, the face of a giant elephant, short legs with huge claws, the back of a dinosaur, and a spear-headed tail. I don't even get how you can fit an elephant's face on a frog's head, like surely the proportions just aren't possible. Claims about the beast were made by land surveyor and local prankster Eugene Shepard, who gathered a group of people to capture the beast. They said they used dynamite to kill it, and pictures of the charred remains were given to the media. I mean, are we gonna believe unreliable source Eugene? Are we not? It apparently went extinct after its main source of food, all white bulldogs, became scarce in the area. And finally, at number 1 is the Wendigo. Now this is a supernatural beast that comes from Algonquin First Nations folklore in Canada. Woohoo, Canada! They live in forests and other wooded areas, but the first thing you'll find out about a Wendigo is that they're a cannibalistic monster that eat and kill anything in their path. In the legend, Wendigos come to be when humans are overtaken by greed or when they're weakened by extreme conditions like cold or hunger. They're known to infect communities and people with the purest form of evil. Miss me with that. Looks wise, they vary. Some are known to be extremely thin with their skeletons pushing out of their ashy mummy-like skin. Other stories say they're giants who become bigger the more they eat. Their ears are pointed, or they sometimes have antlers coming out of their head, and their eyes are like sunken black holes of death. Certified. They're known to have certain powers, like their senses are heightened to like vampire from Twilight level. They have superhuman strength and stamina that lets them stalk their prey for weeks if they have to, just like the vampires from Twilight. They can move at the speed of the wind and can walk over deep snow or water without sinking, so far the Wendigo is looking like a Cullen. In terms of killing them, you can kill them with a gun or a bat, but more complicated stories about it claim you have to cut its heart out and melt it in a fire. And I mean, good luck getting close enough to it to cut its heart out. Honestly, it'll most likely cut your heart out before you even get that far, so I mean, pick your battles.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Smiler. This story comes from Reddit user Blasphemous Mushrooms, and it's about his friend Tom. Tom was a new police officer who had been given late night shifts. He never came across anything too strange on his patrol, but this night was different. He was by a local park, checking there was nobody doing anything suspicious there late at night. As he walked around the outskirts of the woods, he saw a man standing with his back facing him on the edge of the darkness. Tom yelled out to the man, "Hey, you, what are you doing? Come over here right now." The man turned round and gave him a blood-curdling smile. Then he ran into the woods. Without even thinking, Tom chased after him. The smiling man was leaping over branches and ducking under fallen trees like a pro. It was almost inhuman. He was on another level. Eventually, he stopped in a clearing in the forest. He smiled and then kept running. Finally, they reached a clearing in the woods. Tom was exhausted and only just managed to even look up. The man had stopped. He turned around, smiled, and then began to walk slowly back into the woods again. Tom chased, but the man was gone. It was like he had just vanished into thin air. To this day, he swears this wasn't a normal criminal. He had an experience with a sinister paranormal being. Next up at number 9 now, we have the kidnapping. This one comes from Dr. Jim Danger, who said that when he was 18, he and his friends took a trip to the Apalachicola Forest in Florida. They drove deep into the woods so they wouldn't be disturbed by any park rangers. On the very first night, they decided to do some exploring. Almost immediately on their walk, they started seeing signs that someone had been there before them. Big bags of trash were strewn everywhere. They came across a campsite with a van. There were clothes strung up on a line, coolers around the area, and a big golden retriever. They tried to back out, but then an old man stepped out and greeted them. He was friendly and chatted to them for 10 minutes about where they were from before they went on their way. Something didn't seem quite right with him. 2 months after the trip, a friend called him and told him to turn on the news. It showed an old guy with a van and a golden retriever. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, and he had just been convicted of at least 4 murders. He had kidnapped and murdered a girl in Georgia, an older couple in North Carolina, and a girl in the very same park they had been in not long after they left. They called the police and ended up actually helping them with the investigation that sent the murderer to prison. At number 8 now, we have the Mountain Man. This one comes from Reddit user CMurder4000. He's a geologist who said that he did his graduate fieldwork in Nevada. He was way out in the middle of nowhere when he saw a hand-built shack in the distance. A mountain man stepped out and looked at him. He panicked and went away. A while later, he was in a nearby area when he walked up to what looked like some kind of farm. When he got closer, he could smell the strong scent of marijuana. It was an outdoor weed farm. As he turned to get out of there, he was confronted by a man with a gun. The man offered him $10,000 to not report what he had seen and let him go. He agreed, but he never collected the $10,000 or even reported it, saying he was too scared to do either. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Screaming Woods. This forest lies just outside of Pluckley, said to be the most haunted village in Britain. The woods get their name because of the blood-curdling screams locals hear from the forest late at night. They say it's haunted by a highwayman who was captured by the villagers hundreds of years ago. They dragged the criminal into the woods, pinned him to a tree, and killed him with a sword. He screamed as he fell to his death. Visitors come from all over to experience the paranormal goings on there. I found a story from a recent visitor that went like this. I was in Pluckley and a group of friends and I decided to go to Deering Woods. When we got there was birds singing and the atmosphere seemed quite happy. We got out the car and my friend noticed that the birds had stopped singing as we went into the woods. You could have heard a pin drop as we walked in up to halfway towards the crossroads, and us girls decided to come out, so we went into the car and the boys went back in. About 20 minutes later, the boys came running out. They got in the car, started it, and turned it head on to the woods where my friend's brand new car had stalled. We saw this black mist coming towards us as if it was walking down the path. There was definitely something there. We then went down to the Black Horse pub where we discussed the day's ghost hunt, and the boys said it was only when they started getting close to the crossroads that it appeared, so they ran out. We have talked to a few of the local people who have said that early in the morning you can hear screaming coming from the woods. Next up at number 6 now, we have The Thing. This one comes from Surly Vet. He said his friend was deer hunting once in the mountains of Virginia back in the 1990s. One winter morning he set out with his gun to a tree stand. It was still very dark when he arrived, and so he climbed up and waited until dawn. While he was waiting, he decided to reverse the batteries in his flashlight. He had an issue with the switch and thought this might fix it. Suddenly though, he was disturbed by a chill running down his spine. Out of nowhere, he began to feel a crippling fear and a feeling of being watched. He was thinking about climbing down from the tree stand and walking back to his truck when he heard a blood-curdling scream at the base of his tree, along with scratches and rustling in the bushes. He fumbled for his flashlight and cursed himself for messing around with the batteries then. He said the thing that was down there was able to elicit a fear in him like nothing he'd ever experienced. Before that, he'd always felt very calm with a gun and confident that he could handle any animal out there. This time though, he was filled with horror and dread. The thing screamed, shrieked and scratched for 15 minutes and then total silence. Not once did he see anything. When he came down a few hours later, he packed up and left the area. He has never been hunting again. Moving on to number 5 now, we have The Rope. This one was first told by Rodat on Reddit. He wrote a brilliant first-hand account which I'll read for you now. Me and my friends thought it would be a great idea to share a few drinks on the side of a dark and unfrequented mountain road at 2 in the morning when everyone should be asleep and no one would bother our drunken boisterousness. Where I grew up, it's very common to go around on motorcycles, not the speedy racing types, but the more commercial 150cc variety. It's also very common to ride these motorcycles without helmets, and the weather usually calls for just a light windbreaker, even on very dark nights on lonely roads such as the one we were on. After distancing ourselves sufficiently from civilization as it was, we parked by the side of the road under a tree. I should mention there was a dim glow emanated by the moon, and our eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness enough to see each other. Another thing worth mentioning is that this road led to an army encampment several kilometers away. So the only sort of people that would potentially drive by us were tough army folk. It was now 10 minutes past, and we were having a good time when we see headlights creeping up towards us. We ignore them because we were all well sheltered from the pavement, sitting under a large tree whose branches grew wide and provided a good deal of cover. The headlights belonged to a Jeep that zoomed past us and suddenly came to a halt. They see us. This was terrifying because here we are, drunk as college students usually are, on bikes without helmets at 3 a.m. on a winding mountain road. But our fear was slightly alleviated as the car drove away. Still, why stop at all? They joked and said that the guy probably saw there was 4 of us and 1 of them. Ha ha ha, loser. Some more time passes. A second pair of headlights belonging to another car drives past us, stops, and then leaves. At this point, we were getting more and more sober and more worried, so we decide to call it a night and head home. We get on our bikes and start riding back when one of us realizes he's left his backpack under the tree. So we turn around to cover those 3 to 4 kilometers to where we were. As we approach the tree, the backpack owner dismounts while we turn the bikes around. One of our headlights sweeps an intensely bright beam across the branches of the tree. As it points to the branches just above where we were sitting, in a flash we witness, illuminated in stark contrast to the background darkness, a human body hanging by a rope. It had been there the whole time. Now we know why the cars were stopping and we drove on. Next up at number 4 now, we have Sally in the Wood. Just outside of Bath in the UK, you will find some woods that many locals dare not go near. It's a patch of woodland known simply as Sally in the Wood. Supposedly, it's haunted by the ghost of a murdered girl. They say that birds in the woods there cannot sing. Drivers have reported hearing a child scream from the darkness, and some swear they see the ghost of a young girl running out into the road. Legend says that Sally, the murdered girl, haunts the woods at night. She causes cars to crash on the unlit stretch of road where she comes out from behind the trees. They say she was a gypsy girl, supposedly imprisoned in the 18th century. She was locked up in a tower without food and water, left to die inside the woods. Others say she was a local witch who lived to be 100 years old and now continues to torment others in death. Locals say that she may be dead, but her chilling stories live on. Coming in at number 3 now, we have the cougar. This one comes from Reddit user Smokey the Marshmallow. He said the scariest experience he had as a park ranger in Washington State was being stalked by a cougar for a day and a half. One day she was hiking up an old trail when she had the creepy feeling of being watched. That night she camped at a shelter made of 3 walls and a roof. One side was completely open. At one point, she even put her emergency foil tarp around her sleeping bag so that she could hear anything stepping around her. The next day, she found fresh cougar feces and scratches on trees on the trail that she had just hiked on. About a mile past the shelter, she found a half-eaten deer in a brush off the trail. That's when she knew that a cougar was nearby and that it was stalking her. The last 2 hours of hiking through the dense forest were the most hair-raising of any hike she had been on. Next up at number 2 now, we have The Visitor. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this story in another video, but it's too good to leave off the list. It comes from Senior Puffy Pants. I still remember that name. He said he was once leading a group of school kids up Mount Sterling in North Carolina. They were camping at the top of the mountain on a beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and the other guide went to bed in their tents. He chose to sleep in a hammock outside. He lay there reading his book until 10:30 p.m. when he decided to go to sleep. The moon was so bright that it lit up the trail they had just climbed up on. As he was drifting off to sleep, he saw something move on the trail. As he looked closer, he noticed it was a person. They were in the middle of nowhere, and there was someone hiking up the trail towards them with no headlamp on or any gear. He froze as the person moved closer towards the camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain and then stopped in their tracks. It was a man. He sat there in a way that looked like he wasn't trying to sleep. He was just watching them. The guide was terrified. He stared back at the man. They stared at each other. This went on for hours and hours. Then, at 3:30 in the morning, the man stood up. He took a moment to survey the camp, a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail they had all come up on. To this day, he has no idea who the man was, what he wanted, and why exactly he was staring at them. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Goblin. This one comes from Reddit user Justin F. 100,000. He said this one happened about 8 years ago. He was working as a camp counselor for Camp Tommy in New York State. He was staying in some cabins at the top of the mountain, each one separated by about half a mile. One night, at about 1 a.m., he was sneaking off to meet his girlfriend in another cabin. He decided to cut through the forest to speed up the journey. Suddenly, he heard a rustling in the woods, and he stopped to investigate it. There are big animals that live in those woods, so he was expecting to see something like that. A bear, perhaps. All of a sudden, though, this 3-foot-tall humanoid thing jumped out of the bushes and just looked at him. It was too dark to make out any real features, but it definitely had 2 feet, 2 arms, and basically looked just like a person, but tiny. He was curious and walked towards it. He spooked the thing and it bolted back out into the woods. It ran stiffly but was very, very quick. To this day, he has no idea what the creature was, although everyone seems to have their own theories.
At number 10, we have Griffith Park, Los Angeles, USA. This park is a pretty famous tourist destination. People from all over this world will come to this place to see the spot where Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone did some dances from La La Land. Personally, I never saw the movie, so I don't really care. But beyond this forest being blessed by the presence of Hollywood A-listers, it has also been cursed. The park was previously owned by Don Antonio Felice. He was a wealthy man and he had a niece per Tanya. Things were going pretty good for them. They're all rich and stuff. They're living in a massive park. Then the family hit some hard times. Don got smallpox and died in 1863. This would be an even worse outcome for his niece. She thought she was gonna get a big payday when her uncle passed, but turns out he left her nothing in his will. So she put a curse on the whole park. Since then, there have been several murders, fires, and even satanic rituals inside this park. At number 9 we have Eden Park, Cincinnati, Ohio. If you're in Cincinnati, Ohio, chances are you're already having a pretty bad day. You probably just watched the Cincinnati Bengals lose and now you're on your way to watch the Reds do the same. But if you wanted to make your time there a little worse, you might want to take a stroll through Eden Park. This place is apparently haunted by the ghost of Imogene Remus. She was killed in the park by her husband. It was 1927 and she was on her way to the law office to get some divorce papers so she could leave her husband. Well, he didn't like this very much, so he chased her down in his car and shot her dead right in the park. It is said that now the park is haunted by the lady in the black dress. At number 8 we have Elfin Forest, San Diego, USA. A common theme for this list is a lot of gruesome things can happen in a forest. I thought they were all supposed to be cherry picking and picnic, but there's also lynchings and massacres. Who knew? Elfin Forest has a ton of supernatural tales about it. It's said to be the home of mythical creatures. If you're there the right time of year, you can see them frolicking through the forest. Now, if magic monsters isn't enough to get you hyped up, you should go check out this place for something a little more rooted in reality. In the 1800s, the forest was occupied by several different groups of gypsies. Now, gypsies get a very mixed reaction, and apparently the townfolk living close to this forest really didn't like them. They hated them so much that they went in with some pitchforks and torches to drive them all out. Many of the gypsies made it away, but the few that weren't quick enough were killed. The survivors then cursed the land, and if there's anything I don't want to do, it's mess with gypsy curses. Now the forest is said to be super haunted. There's apparently a ghost of a headless horseman riding a black stallion, and some ghostly ladies in red dresses floating all around. At number 7 we have Jack London State Historic Park, Glen Ellen, USA. Jack London is a famous author, so famous that he actually got a whole state park named after him. I mean, if I lived my whole life and did awesome things, so awesome that people wanted to name something after me, I would probably want a burrito chain. But I guess a park is fine too, I just think it's kinda lame. But this park was named after Jack because his family used to live out there on their massive ranch. He was even building his dream home out on this park until a huge fire burned it down. What a bummer. He didn't even get to see it finished before he died. Now the wreckage just sits on the park, and apparently him and his wife were both buried in the park, and now they haunt the burned down house. Like, dude, get over it. The house is gone. You're dead. It's time to move on. At number 6 we have Highgate Cemetery, London, England. This cemetery was established in the middle of a forest back in the 1800s. The problem with building a cemetery in the middle of a forest is it takes a lot of upkeep, and apparently this was way too much work because it wasn't long before the place was pretty much abandoned and the forest started to take over. It remains a landmark, but a forgotten one. But when it became a hot spot to shoot horror movies, there was a surge of new visitors. This breath of fresh air also brought some new rumors about the park being plagued by supernatural things, mainly vampires. Rumors started to swirl around that some of the graves had vampires in them and that people had spotted a floating pale figure dressed in all black. This got vampire hunters from all over the world all hot and bothered, so they started to travel there to the park, dig up the graves, and stab the dead bodies in the hearts with wooden stakes, just in case, which I totally support. The people are dead, they don't care if you dig them up, and if they are vampires, then I want to make sure they're dead. And if vampire hunting does nothing for you, another reason to visit this park is there's famous people buried there. Kinda cool. At number 5 we have Hunting Island, South Carolina, USA. The Hunting Island State Park is not only home to a beautiful lush forest, but also a mysterious lighthouse. Nothing like a good old-fashioned lighthouse ghost. The lighthouse is at the edge of the forest and has a few different specters that have been seen roaming around it. There's one of an old grumpy lighthouse keeper who has never forgiven himself for a young boy drowning on the premises, and the other is of his daughter that killed herself inside the lighthouse. This guy can't catch a break, I'm sorry dude. At number 4 we have the Black Forest, Germany. This place seems to be ripped right out of a fairy tale. We could go on for hours and hours about the different legends involving this forest. It's said to be the home of different species of dwarves, elves, and a whole bunch of other things that coexist. If you're interested in getting some werewolf powers, there's also said to be werewolves in this place. And there's a king who will steal your girlfriend and take her to his underwater world. I don't know if he teaches you how to breathe underwater before he kidnaps you, but there's nothing about that in the brochure. This is the kind of place that I would like to avoid, because I don't want to be the guy who walks into a forest and then some little fairy is like, "You're the chosen one," and then I gotta spend the next 6 months saving some magical beings from a dark lord. Like, I have plans this weekend, I don't have time for this. At number 3 we have the China State Camp Park, San Rafael, USA. It's beautiful, it's right next to the beach, it's the kind of place you go on one knee and propose to the person you want to be with for the rest of your life. But it's also the spot of one of the darkest murders I've ever heard about. A young girl and her family and her boyfriend were all out for a nice family barbecue in the park. Probably had one of those little portable grills, a bunch of burgers, maybe they were gonna roast some marshmallows at the end of the night. Well, for whatever reason, this wonderful evening inspired this young girl and her boyfriend to kill the girl's parents. And instead of roasting marshmallows at the end of the night, they ended up burning her dead parents' body parts on a campfire to try and get rid of the evidence. Aokigahara Forest, Japan. I'm sure a lot of you at home remember when Logan Paul did his little trip over to this forest for some views. The Aokigahara Forest is at the base of Mount Fuji and is better known for its name, the Suicide Forest. It has been the most popular spot in the world for people to kill themselves. People who enter this forest for any other reason, say to go for a hike, might run into the body of someone who went in there to end their own. Police visit this forest often to remove the bodies, but because of the density of the forest and the twisting paths, it can be very hard to locate people's dead bodies. It's also very easy to get lost in there. If all that wasn't enough for you to want to jump out of your skin, then I'll let you know this is also a hot spot for ghosts and demons. Many Japanese legends tell of demons that live in the forest. They say demons corrupt the minds of people, and that's why so many people travel there to kill themselves in the forest. At number 1, we have Yosemite National Park, California, USA. For our number 1 spot, we have one of the most beautiful places in all of America. For real, you cannot come here without gaining a massive appreciation for nature and exploring the outdoors. It's actually breathtaking. Even though this place should be on everyone's travel list, I will let you know there are a few ghosties hiding there. Two of the most famous ghosts that make their home there are Chief Tenaya. He was the former chief of the Awatichi Nation. People are unsure why his spirit is yet to move on to the other side. Some people think he's protecting the park, and other people think he might be a guide for people who get lost in the gorgeous landscape. But for sure the biggest celebrity you could run into from the spectral realm would be John F. Kennedy. It's said that his ghost has been seen walking around the Alhani Hotel located in the park. If any of you viewers are planning a trip there and you see him, please just walk up to him for me and say, "Hey, I think you got something on your head."